So, what is it about Japanese architecture that's so captivating? It's more than just a look, more than a style. It's a story, really. A story about this deep, centuries old relationship between people and their environment. So, let's dive into that story, one that's literally written in wood. To really get this, you have to start with one simple fact. Get this. Around 70% of the entire Japanese archipelago is covered in forest. That one statistic, that's the foundation for everything we're about to explore. With all that wood around, it's no wonder a culture of living with it, not just using it, began to grow. And that right there, that's the core idea, the absolute guiding principle behind Japanese architecture. It's all about coexisting with nature, not trying to bend it to your will or conquer it. That single thought has shaped everything, the buildings, the techniques, the whole spirit of the design. All right, let's jump back in time to see how this philosophy really took root. It was born out of pure necessity, but also some pretty remarkable ingenuity. Early on, it was all about adaptation. Way back in the Jomon period, people were building these pit dwellings, literally digging into the earth to use its natural insulation. Pretty smart, right? Cool in the summer, warm in the winter. But then, things changed. Rice farming starts up in the Yayoi period, and suddenly you've got this precious harvest you need to protect. So what do? They lift their buildings up off the ground, protecting the green from humidity and pests. They were learning to read and respond to their environment. And this deep respect for nature, well, it started to shape their spiritual beliefs and their architecture. In the earliest Shinto shrines, beauty wasn't about adding a ton of fancy decorations. No, it was about taking things away, subtracting the unnecessary, so that the natural beauty of the wood itself could shine through. This aesthetic of subtraction became a total cornerstone of Japanese culture. Okay, now we get to a really cool part of the story. This is where new ideas from abroad meet this deeply ingrained local wisdom, and it just sparks this incredible burst of innovation. So when Buddhism arrives, it brings with it all these incredible architectural ideas from China and the Korean peninsula. Think big tile roofs, grand temple designs. But here's the thing. Japan didn't just copy and paste. They brilliantly adapted these foreign ideas, tweaking them to handle the country's humid climate and, this is key, its constant earthquakes. And that need for earthquake resistance, it led to the perfection of something truly amazing, kigumi. It's this mind-blowing art of interlocking wooden joints. I mean, these massive, complex structures are put together without a single nail or screw. It's like a giant, super strong puzzle that gives buildings like the Horyuji Temple both immense strength and the flexibility to absorb the shock of a quake. This commitment to craftsmanship even redefined the whole idea of preservation. At the famous Ise Grand Shrine, they don't try to make one single building last forever. Instead, every 20 years, they completely rebuild it from scratch. This ritual is called Shikinen Sengu, and the critical idea here is that the focus isn't on preserving the object, it's on preserving the skill and the spirit it takes to create it. And the process itself is this incredible ritual. First, they build a perfect, identical shrine right next to the old one. Then, in a huge ceremony, the resident spirit is moved to its new home. And only then do they carefully take the old shrine apart. That 20-year cycle is genius, right? It's a living system that guarantees the master craftsmanship gets passed seamlessly from one generation to the next. It can't be lost. This just speaks to the incredible vision of the Miyadaikyu, the master carpenters who build these sacred sites. They aren't just thinking about next year or even the next decade. They're selecting a piece of wood, thinking about how it will stand 100 or even 1,000 years from now. Now, this philosophy wasn't just for holy sites. Nope, it was applied and refined everywhere, from mighty castles to the most humble city homes, always finding that perfect balance between purpose and pure elegance. Just look at a Japanese castle. It's a masterclass in having it both ways. On one hand, it's an absolute fortress with these massive stone walls and confusing maze-like layouts designed to stop an invading army in its tracks. But on the other hand, it's a symbol of power with its brilliant white walls and graceful layered roofs that are meant to inspire awe. Function and beauty, perfectly intertwined. And in the crowded cities of the Edo period, you see that same cleverness in everyday life. The machiya, or townhouses, were often built on these long, super narrow plots of land. So, to make these tight spaces livable, they featured inner courtyards. It was a brilliant way to draw light and fresh air deep into the home, connecting even the most urban residents back to nature. inside these homes, a special kind of magic was at work. Shoji screens, those iconic sliding panels of wood and paper, they don't just block the view. They catch the harsh sunlight and diffuse it into this soft, tranquil glow that just completely shapes the atmosphere of a room. It's this incredibly careful and deliberate use of light and shadow. And maybe the ultimate, purest expression of this whole philosophy is the tea house. It's this tiny, minimalist space, but it's meant to feel like an entire universe. By using only simple, natural materials and stripping away all decoration, it embodies the spirit of wabi-sabi, that profound idea of finding beauty in imperfection, in simplicity, and in the natural world. So, where does this incredible tradition stand today? Let's bring the story into the modern era, where these ancient skills are facing some new challenges, but also finding some new hope. The reality is, this heritage is at risk. We're actually facing what you could call a crisis of craft. The number of master artisans, the miyadaiku, and other experts who carry all this knowledge is falling year after year. The long, intense apprenticeships required just don't fit that easily into our fast-paced world. And what's being lost isn't just a set of techniques, it's an entire philosophy. The ability to read the grain of a tree, to speak the language of wood, to build in a real dialogue with nature. The decline is dramatic, and the risk of losing this wisdom forever is very, very real. But the story doesn't end there, not by a long shot. In fact, a modern renaissance is underway. A whole new generation of architects and craftspeople is rediscovering the value of wood, sparking a new era of innovation. There are a few big forces driving this. There's a renewed global focus on sustainable materials, right? There's also a real human desire for the warmth and comfort that wooden spaces provide. And new technologies are making even high-rise wooden buildings possible. So you have these young architects who are now blending ancient joinery with digital design, creating something completely new. Which brings us right back to where we started. The story of Japanese architecture has always been a conversation between people and the forest. It teaches us that true beauty isn't in decoration, but in harmony. And it leaves us with a vital question for our own time. How could we build our future with that same wisdom?
Have you ever looked at a building and just thought, how? Well, today we're diving into some of the most mind-bending structures on the planet, Japan's ancient temples and houses. These things are massive, they're made of wood, and they're held together without a single nail, screw, or drop of glue.
And that's the big mystery, isn't it? How can these enormous wooden buildings not only stay standing, but survive for centuries through typhoons and earthquakes in one of the shakiest places on Earth? It sounds impossible, but it's not magic. It's actually an absolutely brilliant form of engineering.
So the secret isn't something they add to the wood. It's found in the wood itself. The master carpenters who designed these buildings basically created a secret language, a way to shape and join timber that creates unbelievable strength from nothing but pure geometry. And that art has a name. It's called kigumi. This is the traditional Japanese craft of creating interlocking wooden joints. It's the whole philosophy behind this type of architecture, where the wood itself does all the heavy lifting.
The easiest way to picture it is to think of a super complex 3D jigsaw puzzle. Every single piece, every beam and post is carved with just insane precision so that they slot together perfectly, locking the whole thing into one solid structure. No fasteners necessary.
And this language of wood even has its own vocabulary. It's mostly built on two main types of joints. First, you've got sugite, which are for connecting wood end to end to make longer beams. And then there's shiguchi, which are for joining pieces together at an angle, like where a horizontal beam connects to a vertical pillar.
And the way they work is just genius. Some joints just slide into place, others have this cool little twist-to-lock mechanism, and some are so perfectly crafted that the friction alone is strong enough that you could literally lift an entire building frame just by grabbing one of the pieces. It's this incredible dance between friction and geometry.
Okay, so we kind of get the how, but that leads to an even more interesting question. Why? Why go through all this incredibly difficult and time-consuming work? The answer shows this deep understanding of how to work with nature, not fight against it. Seriously, think about it. Why go to all this trouble? Nails are way faster. They're cheaper, they're easier. Why would you spend weeks, maybe even months, carving one perfect joint when you could just hammer something together in a few days?
Well, the answer is literally in the ground beneath their feet. Japan gets rattled by earthquakes constantly. A rigid building, one that's nailed together tightly, would just shatter and collapse during a big quake. These ancient builders knew they needed something totally different, something that could move with the tremors.
And that flexibility is everything. See, traditional kagumi deliberately creates just a tiny bit of play in each joint. This lets the whole building sway and flex, almost like it's dancing. It absorbs the shockwaves from an earthquake and safely dissipates the energy. Now, this was all based on centuries of hands-on experience. Today, architects often use a hybrid approach. They take that ancient wisdom and combine it with modern structural calculations and even some metal brackets to create an incredibly robust, systematic safety net.
So, this brings us to the human element. Because a system this perfect, this intricate, doesn't just happen by itself. It demands a level of skill and pure dedication that is, well, it's almost hard to wrap your head around. The master carpenters who specialize in these temples and shrines are called Miyadaiku, and the level of precision they work at is it's truly mind-bending. This is a craft that's passed down from master to apprentice, and it takes years and years to even begin to master it.
And listen to this quote from a woodworker who tried to learn the technique. "The lack of tolerance here is tough. You have to chisel exactly to your gauge line. There is absolutely zero room for error. You take off one shaving too many, and the whole joint is useless."
So how small are we talking? What is that margin of error? 1 millimeter. That is it. If a joint is off by just a single millimeter, it will not fit. Period. The entire structure relies on flawless, absolute perfection. And that incredible precision allows them to pull off some truly spectacular techniques that do two things at once. First, they create enormous structural strength, and second, they create stunning beauty, often by making all the hard work completely invisible. So for example, take the kanatsugi joint. By carving these interlocking T-shapes and then securing the whole thing with a final peg, these Miyadaiku create a connection that is unbelievably strong. It can't be pulled apart. It resists forces from any direction. Up, down, sideways, you name it.
And then, just when you think it can't get any cooler, there's the kakushiari, the hidden joint. This is just pure mastery, okay? The entire complex locking mechanism is totally concealed inside the wood. From the outside, it just looks like two pieces of wood are perfectly touching. It's this beautiful, clean, seamless look. It's an engineering marvel and a work of art all in one.
But look, this isn't just a history lesson. This ancient wisdom is very, very much alive today, and it's continuing to shape not just Japan, but the world. You have to understand, kagumi is not a lost art sitting in a museum. It's a living, breathing tradition. And it represents this deep philosophy of sustainability and permanence, which is a pretty stark contrast to our modern scrap-and-build mentality. These buildings were always designed to last forever. And they were designed to be repaired. There's this incredible technique called netsugi. So after a few hundred years, the bottom of a wooden pillar might start to rot from moisture. But you don't tear the whole pillar down. No way. You just expertly cut out the damaged part and then graft in a new piece of wood, carved to fit perfectly. The famous stage at the Kiyomizu-dera Temple in Kyoto is the perfect example. Some of those pillars are about 400 years old, and as they've worn down, they haven't been replaced. Instead, they've been maintained using netsugi, allowing the original building to survive for centuries by just seamlessly blending the old with the new. And that really brings us to today. The timeless wisdom of kigumi, that flexibility, that strength, that incredible beauty, it's now been combined with super powerful, modern, computer-aided structural analysis. And the result is buildings that have the soul of ancient craftsmanship, but with all the safety guarantees of modern science. So it all leaves us with one final big question. In our world, a world that so often values fast and cheap over slow and durable, what can we really learn from a craft that was designed from the very beginning to last forever? It really makes you think about what we choose to value and what we want to build for the future.
What is it about Japan that captivates you? Please let me know in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and stay tuned for our next episode. Thank you so much for watching.